Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
There was a materially poor man who once approached a sage, some say it was the Buddha, and asked him, "Why am I so poor?" The Buddha answered, "Probably because you don't practice generosity. Probably because you don't practice charity." Amused and a little upset by the response, the man challenged, "Charity? I don't have anything. How can I practice charity?" The sage replied, "Who said you don't have anything? You have 5 treasures with you that you can definitely share with others and give to others. Firstly, you have your smile, which you can share with others. It's free and it's awesome, and it has an amazing impact on others. Secondly, you have your eyes. You can look at others with eyes full of love and concern and make them feel cared for. Third, you have your tongue. With your tongue, you can speak kind, encouraging, appreciative, uplifting words and make people feel valued and inspired. You can spread joy and positivity using your tongue. And then you have your heart. With your loving heart, you can wish well for others and pray for the well-being and happiness of others. And lastly, you possess the treasure of your body. With this body, you can serve others, do good deeds, help people in need. Help is not always money. A small caring gesture can light someone's life up as well. Do these and you'll certainly feel rich. Of course, the message is not that financial resources are not needed. We live in a real world with real needs. Moreover, without caring for ourselves, it's hard to care for others. The message here is that even if we don't have the required resources, we can still be the instruments of doing good in our own ways, according to our own capacities, and make this world a better place than what it is now.
Rule number 2, speak up.
And that state of hopelessness, if you don't speak up, it'll lead to further hopelessness. And if you still don't speak up, it can go to further hopelessness. And so bad. I saw my aunt burn herself to death. I saw my friend's son, his medical mark sheet, being topper of the university, kept next to his dead body. ये लोग बोल पाते तो? If only they would have opened up their heart and spoken their heart. Well, maybe my aunt would still be with me. Maybe my friend's son would still be doing his postgrad and contributing to the world by healing other people with his medical expertise. I have an humble appeal. Look for that friend. If you have one, blessed are you. Open your heart on a regular basis. If you don't have one, look for one and invest in that relationship.
Rule number 3, have a routine.
Meditation is, before bed, my meditation is a gratitude practice.
Like prayer.
Prayer. Every evening before I go to bed is a practice of gratitude, recounting all the things that happened in the day and being grateful for everything that happened, consciously practicing gratitude. And eventually it just becomes a part of you anyways.
Yeah.
And the first thing in the morning as soon as I am up is also beginning my day with gratitude. And then of course I have a specific time for meditation as well, which I spend like an hour and a half every day.
Rule number 4, have a balance.
If I get to be in front of every kid in every school in the world, Evan, the one thing that I would like to teach or tell the students who are listening to me is that we cannot go on extreme sides of the spectrum. One extreme of the spectrum is follow your passion, be yourself, correct? Which is what I primarily teach as well. Like what Albert Einstein said, you cannot judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Right.
You know, you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Judge the fish by its ability to swim in the water. Correct? Now, 2 things happen in that case. Number 1, the fish is effective in doing what it can do because it's in its right habitat. And number 2, it's satisfied because it's in the right habitat. Correct? Put a monkey in the water, the monkey is miserable. Put a fish on the tree, the fish is miserable. Put a monkey on the tree, the monkey achieves excellence. Put a fish in the water, the fish achieves excellence. So I'm one of the proponents. I'm a proponent of this principle that We must definitely encourage our kids to follow their potential and follow their passion. But what happens often is we go on such an extreme end of the spectrum that the other side, where what the education system has to offer is there are many good things in the education system as well. So if I were to talk to the students, I would say, let's find that balance, finding best of both the worlds, grab the best out of what you can have from the education system and let the education system also foster a culture, an ethic, an ethos, where we allow kids to be who they are.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, stay inspired.
Reading inspirational and motivational books. And I also think because the online world is so big today, the online platform is so big today, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, whether it is Twitter, whether it is YouTube, these massive platforms where there's so much material available, so much motivational stuff available, so much inspiration available. As soon as we feel low, we may have our choice speakers, we may have our choice gurus, we may have our choice experts by listening to whom we feel motivated, by listening to whom we feel uplifted, by listening to whom we feel energized. We should regularly, on a proactive basis, listen to podcasts, watch videos, or read books that can keep us going. This is, of course, not when somebody goes to the extreme end of ending their lives. Can't read a book or watch a video there. But that did happen. We posted a video on Facebook, reposted a video this morning where we were talking about an individual who wanted to give up his life in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. He was a university student. And as he was in that moment of committing suicide, hanging himself with his head in the noose, and there was a notification on his phone, a WhatsApp notification. The guy happened to see that notification. It happened to be one of the videos we had made. And he watched those videos for 4 to 8 hours, non-stop, all online stuff available from our channels online, and decided I shouldn't commit suicide. Decided to keep going. Which is why I think that the third thing to boost our coping mechanism is to look at online motivational material as well. It's a proactive thing to constantly keep looking for good material so that we feel inspired, motivated. Challenges and problems are going to be there for everybody, like I said earlier, but we'll be stronger to face that.
Rule number 6, live in a state of meditation.
What does someone like you do to meditate? How do you meditate?
When I came to the monastery, the meditation I was taught was mantra meditation, which is chanting on beads. So I chant a mantra. And as I began the process, I realized how challenging it was to be present into the sound of the mantra and to be totally in a space, in a zone of thoughtlessness where there's nothing bothering your mind and you're completely present and listening to the sound and totally absorbed, in the sound. I realized that it was a massive uphill task. And I think the challenge comes from the fact that we've got so used to multitasking that our mind functions on 20 tracks. So when we're just on the meditation track, there are 19 other tracks to deal with.
Yeah.
You have your personal life, you have relationship issues, you have your professional issues. There's so many things going on. You have issues coming from family, so much going on in the country. There's so much that's occupying our mental space. And when you actually want to get onto the track of meditation by kind of just putting all of this in the back seat, it becomes practically impossible. And a lot of people tell me this. And when they're trying to meditate, this is what happens to them. And I share my journey with them. This is exactly what happened to me when I started. It's been 25 years now, every single day without one day's gap, 1.5 hours every day. And I tell them that it's not a challenge today. It would be very high-headed to say that, okay, I've reached a state of enlightenment. When I sit for meditation, everything's kind of there and I'm totally absorbed. Very high-headed, I feel, to say that. But I did a few things that I feel can benefit those who want to really get into a deeper state of meditation. I look at meditation in two ways. A is the meditation as in the practice. And B is everything that we do in our life as meditation. You know? And I prefer to work more on everything in my life as a meditation, which feeds into my practice of meditation.
100%. But do not neglect the practice.
No, do not neglect the practice, for sure. Yeah. So I'll tell you what I do, for instance. One meal a day, I just eat by myself. 2 meals I take with my friends, some of my monk friends, where we discuss, chat, eat. 1 meal is just by myself. The reason being, I want to be present, mindful, in the moment, to savor the entire experience of touching, feeling, smelling, tasting that food. I avoid forks and spoons as much as is possible because I want to touch and feel that experience of the food. Now, the reason I do it is because it just means no phones, no books, nobody to talk to, and just being there eating. Correct? So what I'm doing is, by just eating that 1 meal by myself, training my mind to be in the present. Like we are talking now. There's 3 meetings lined up for me tonight. And there's a restaurant called Candy and Greens at Breach Candy. The family is a very close friend, you know. So they've just opened up a new rooftop terrace. I've been getting message after message, could you come down today evening for dinner? Right? But it's not on my mind. It's not on my mind. Nothing outside of our conversation between you and me right now is on my mind. So why do I do it? It's because right now I'm training my mind to be in the present. When I used to be in the bathroom, I would sing. Like a big thing for me used to, of course, earlier I would sing a lot of cinema and movie songs. And now I sing some spiritual songs, bhajans, whatever. And then one day I realized, hey, wait a minute. This is not right. Because neither am I into the singing, nor am I into the experience of bathing. So if I'm singing, I'm missing the experience of bathing. And if I'm bathing, I'm not into my singing. So why am I doing 2 things at the same time? I stopped singing, just focusing on the experience of the water coming down my body and experiencing that. So to me, these little things through the day matter a lot to me. And I think that's more of meditation to me. Because then what I do here feeds into my mainstream practice of meditation. And what I do here feeds into the little things as well. So it's kind of a loop, one feeding into other.
Rule number 7, don't lose hope.
Do any of you remember losing a rank in an exam during your school or college days? I remember losing my first rank in a final exam just by a couple of marks. Does anyone remember losing a job opportunity or a promotion at work and feeling very low about it? I'm sure some of you may recall losing in a sports event, or maybe losing a role in a theatrical performance, or maybe losing a sought-after position of power. And what to speak of losing a relationship or losing a dear one? As much as losing something or losing someone can be painful, disappointing, and frustrating, it just happens to be a part of our real life in this real world. There are things in life we end up losing, not because we didn't give our best or not because we were complacent, because there are forces beyond our scope, beyond our abilities to control. And it's very important that we accept this reality. Never lose hope. The one thing that makes life a painful ordeal is hopelessness. A boy once entered a room where he saw 4 lit up candles illuminating the space with their soft glow. The first candle spoke to the boy, I am the candle of love. There was a time when things were used and people were loved, but today, things are loved and people are used to get those things. Nobody values me any longer. Saying this, the candle of love went off. The second candle said, I am the candle of peace. In a world where everything is being torn down to pieces, who values peace? And the second candle went off as well. The third candle turned to the boy and said, I am the candle of trust. If there be anything that's really hard to find in a selfish world, it's trust. What's the point in me staying lit up? The little boy started sobbing as he saw the flame of the candle of trust go off and the room getting darker. The fourth candle spoke in a reassuring tone, don't cry, my boy. I am the candle of hope. As long as I am lit, there'll never be darkness. Things may be dim, but never dark. As long as I am lit, you can pick me up and light the other three candles of love, peace, and trust and brighten the room up again. The boy wiped his tears and with a smile, lighting up his face, lit up the room as he lit the three candles with the candle of hope. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter what you lose in life, never lose hope.
Rule number 8, listen to your conscience. How do people find that thing? How do you recommend when there's a lot of family pressure on them? How do they find the thing?
I find a lot of times it's an issue with the system, correct? Like, for example, the industry, the corporate world, is only picking up people from the top-rated universities. The industry is only picking up students who have the best grades. Now, if you have people who are being picked up based on your university or based on your grades and your marks and your academic performance, then guess what parents are going to pressurize kids with? You better get the marks, you better get the grades, you better get to the best university, correct? And guess what the educational institutions do? It's a demand and supply system. If the demand of the industry is grades, and the parents are pushing to get grades, the educational systems are driven to make kids get grades. Now imagine if the industry changes and the corporate world redefines saying we don't hire grades. We hire passion. We hire candidates for their passion. Correct? Now what are the parents going to say? Don't worry about the grades, son. Look at your passion. And what is the education system going to provide? How to look at your passion. Correct? At the end of the day, it's about the demand and supply, really, So in terms of how does a kid or how does an individual figure that out for himself or herself, number one is there is a voice from within us, correct? And there's a voice from within us that's constantly resonating with our soul saying, I love this, I may be great at it or I may not be great at it, either or, whichever way. But I love this. I'm in absolute love with this. I can wake up early in the morning to do this, and I can go to bed like late in the night if I were doing this. I know that that's what it's really in sync with my soul, Now, what happens with that is sometimes it's multiple things. It's 3, 4, 5 different things for people, right? And now if that be the case, then I think it's also over a period of time, we need to funnel it down, to narrow it down to that one thing. It's like being in love, right? A guy or a girl is in love with somebody. There's 3, 4 different people they're trying and seeing, and they're kind of exploring. But it's one person who really, really strikes that chord. So one thing is to listen to your inner conscience constantly. People who are not in tune with their inner radar are not going to be able to find out what their passion is. If you're living in life only catering to the outside demands and not introspecting, not going deep to listen to your conscience and your inner voice, where's the question of figuring out what the passion is? You have to see what resonates with your soul.
Rule number 9, practice spirituality.
There is a great need that all of us start practicing spirituality. Spirituality not only declutters our mind, meditation, mindfulness, chanting, prayer, doesn't simply declutter of our mind of the anxieties or pressures that we go through, of the stress that we go through. And not only does it uplift our spirits when we feel low and depressed, I think a spiritual process gives us tremendous resilience and gives us tremendous fortitude, gives us tremendous inner strength to stand strong in the midst of all storms. And therefore, one of my favorite quotes, which I've very often brought up in our live sessions, is pain is inevitable misery or suffering is optional. What happens to us, we can't stop that. The factors beyond us. But how we take what happens to us is completely in our hands.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is have fun.
I was in London once walking at Soho Street, Oxford Street near Soho Square. And one British gentleman came up to me and said, "Is that your favorite color?" Because everything's orange.
Yeah.
I said, "I guess so." I didn't of course want to explain to him the deeper significance of what it meant. He didn't want to know.
Yeah.
He just wanted to know if it was my favorite color. I said, "Yeah, I guess so." I think orange represents flames of fire. You know, on one hand, it represents flames of fire. And in the Hindu tradition, when somebody leaves this world, they're cremated. The body is kind of burnt, consumed by the flames of fire. So donning saffron on actually means that I am dead to my own personal interests. It's like these flames of fire have consumed my own selfish interests. And now on, my life is meant to be for the betterment and welfare of others.
It's like you're killing your own ego.
Killing your own ego, yes.
Got it.
And it's kind of now living for others.
Got it.
But that's what it's meant to be. Of course, it's a lifelong journey to live by it, but that's what it signifies. The other aspect of saffron also is like you have saffron as in kesar, you know, the saffron strands. So you take saffron strands, if you've ever added saffron strand to a prep, you usually kind of first roast it a little bit on a pan to take the moisture off. And then you take a little bit of milk and crush it hard in that little tiny bowl of milk. And it starts leaving all the color and the fragrance and the flavor. And then you add it to whatever prep, you know, you just add that saffron to it. So if you compare someone's life to saffron, the strands, then it also means to be a little bit crushed a little bit, roasted a little bit by life, to be able to add color, fragrance, and flavor to the lives of others. You know, so that's what it really means. Of course, a long way to go to be able to live like that, but that's what it signifies.
Yeah.
It's not an easy and immediate acceptance, guys. It takes a while before people who are close to us can understand us. And sometimes they may not even understand us for a life. But again, I must say, it's not them who are going to live our lives. It's we who need to live our lives. But the only asterisk conditions apply to what I'm saying is that when there are financial liabilities, when there are serious situations at home, I think we should take this entire principle with a pinch of salt. We can't be like, you know, really straight away say this, you know, families where there are so many serious situations and people won't be able to do what they want to do straight away. So don't neglect it, just postpone it. I think there will be a time when one can follow it fully.
If somebody is new, so back to the book, called The Way of the Monk, if somebody's new to spirituality, think of somebody in North America who, you know, hasn't come across a monk before, might think it's kind of crazy or weird or different. What do you think is the biggest lesson, the biggest takeaway you want them to take if they pick up the book and read it?
In the book, I talk about the analogy of a car. And all of us have a journey. We have a destination to reach. We have a journey to take. And often, I don't know how it's in Canada, Toronto, but often if you're here in Mumbai, India, you're stuck in traffic. So often you get stuck in life, like you get stuck in the traffic. You know, I want to reach there. You know, you're in the journey, but you feel stuck. You feel stuck in your personal life. You feel stuck in your profession. You feel stuck in your relationships. You feel stuck in your mental health. Right? You feel stuck. And there's nothing worse in life than feeling stuck. Even, I don't think you've been to Bombay, India, but if you ever come to Bombay, you will get the first-hand experience of what it means to be stuck in traffic. It's an amazing city. I love it. I can't think of living anywhere else in the world. But traffic-wise, man, it's insane, right? Now, when you're stuck, the feeling is horrible. It's just so frustrating. Even if you're moving at a slow pace, but you're moving in the right direction, it's satisfying, correct? So I always say, if you are stuck somewhere, don't worry.
अगर आप जीवन में यशस्वी होना चाहते हो,
अगर आप जीवन में सक्सेस प्राप्त करना चाहते हो तो मेहनत करनी पड़ती है, दृढ़ता से जीना पड़ता है, डिटर्मिनेशन से जीना पड़ता है, धीरज रखना पड़ता है, पेशेंट बनना पड़ता है। और यदि इन सब का पालन भी करो तब भी कई बार जीवन में चुनौतियां आती है, चैलेंजेस आती है, हम फेल हो जाते हैं, हम गिर जाते हैं और निराश हो जाते हैं। सक्सेस का, यश का सबसे बड़ा शत्रु है निराशा। यदि निराश हो जाओगे तो सब कुछ खो बैठोगे। जब भी निराश हो जाओ ना तो बस मां जिराफ को याद कर लेना। जब मां जिराफ अपने बच्चे को जन्म देती है तो माता जिराफ बड़ी ऊंची होती है और वो बच्चा ऊंचाई से जोर से जमीन पर गिर जाता है। और जैसे ही बेचारा समझने का प्रयत्न करता है कि मैं कहां गिर गया, तब तक वो मां उस बच्चे के ऊपर खड़ी रहती है और उसको बहुत जोर से लात मारती है। उड़ते हुए बच्चा जाकर कहीं और गिर जाता है और बस अपनी सुध-बुध दोबारा इकट्ठा करने का प्रयत्न करता है। फिर मां उसके ऊपर आकर खड़ी रहती है और दोबारा एक बड़ी जोर से लात मारती है। बच्चा समझ जाता है कि यदि मैं कुछ न करूं ना तो लात खाते रहना पड़ेगा। अपने बड़े ही कमजोर पैरों पर खड़े रहने का प्रयत्न करता है वो जिराफ का बच्चा। फिर दोबारा मां आकर उसको लात मारती है, बच्चा फिर गिर जाता है और समझ जाता है कि यदि मैं खड़े रहकर भागूं नहीं तो बस लात खाते रहना पड़ेगा। जिराफ का ये बच्चा तेजी से भागने का प्रयत्न करता है और तभी मां आकर अपने बच्चे को चूमती है, आलिंगन करती है। मां जिराफ भली भांति जानती है कि जंगल में बड़े खूंखार पशु है, शेर, लोमड़ी इत्यादि, जो नवजात प्राणियों का मांस बड़ा पसंद करते हैं। और मां जिराफ तो बच्चे के साथ, उस शिशु के साथ हमेशा नहीं रह सकती। तब अगर वो बाहर चली जाए तो इस बच्चे की रक्षा कौन करेगा? इसलिए सबसे पहले जैसे उसका जन्म होता है उसको लात मारती है ताकि वो उठना सीखे, दोबारा लात मारती है ताकि उसे वो उठने की जो क्रिया है वो याद रहे, दोबारा लात मारती है ताकि केवल उठे नहीं, दौड़ना प्रारंभ करे। जीवन में कई बार चुनौतियां आएंगी, चैलेंजेस आएंगे और हम गिरेंगे, हम फेल होंगे, लेकिन मां जिराफ और उसके बच्चे को याद कर लेना चाहिए। जब भी चुनौतियां आए, जब भी चैलेंजेस आए, जितनी बार भी आप गिरो, उठना सीखो, उस बच्चे से उठना सीखो, उठ के खड़े रहना सीखो, खड़े रह के भागना सीखो। अगर उठोगे, खड़े रहोगे, भागना सीखोगे, तब यश, सक्सेस के ऊंचे से ऊंचे शिखर पर पहुंचना सीखोगे। In the world out there today, people have a wrong idea of success. People think success means achievement. And people think success means having all what the world is promoting to you. So the more you have, the more successful you are and the more happier you are. That's a completely wrong idea of success that people have. Now when you're wanting to achieve and you're wanting to get the best and you're wanting to get there all the time, obviously you have to work hard. Loads of people are putting in 14, 16, 18 hours of work, not prioritizing their health, not prioritizing their hobbies, not prioritizing their family, not prioritizing their spirituality, not prioritizing their unwinding themselves.
But how much do you prioritize? There's so many things seeking your attention.
Correct.
Is there a risk of people spreading themselves too thin, and how do you figure that out? How do you fix that?
I don't think so. It's a question of spreading yourself out. I think it's a question of finding the right balance. Irritability and lack of satisfaction is an outcome of a life out of balance. You know, a life out of balance. Now it's like when an artist is wanting to make a painting or a pencil sketch, and if he's sharpening the pencil, someone comes and says, "Hey man, you're wasting your time sharpening the pencil." But unless you sharpen the pencil, whatever you do is going to be extremely blunt. So if you even want to be effective at work and achieve, it's better that you be internally focused. If you're not focused and if you're not internally and mentally stable, your output at the workplace is low as well. I'm saying that if you prioritize those things that mean to you, you work on yourself, you work on your internal self, the consequence of that would be you'll be super productive in less number of hours. People are taking much longer to do something that they could have done in much shorter amount of time because they're distracted, they're not focused, they're not together internally.
What you're saying is very simple, but it's not easy.
Absolutely.
So let's cut to the chase.
Sure.
Give it all to our viewers. A few practical solutions to continue to focus on oneself and not be distracted by the noise that there are. Some
Correct.
practical solutions.
Correct. Number one, start taking an inventory regularly.
Okay.
Don't just go with the flow. If you're not even paying attention to, if you're not even cognizant, if you're not even identifying those areas, you're not going to work on them. So first identify that I need to work on this. Understand that this is a priority. Step two is regularly take time out. If you don't take a break, you're simply leading to a breakdown. A break is going to help you get to a breakthrough, but a lack of break is going to get you to a breakdown. If you have ever read the book The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, it's a guy who's been working, achieving, putting his 200% and gets a cardiac arrest at a young age in the courtroom. What is it all about? You've achieved everything and you're a massive failure because you couldn't work on your life. So two is take a break. Now you might say, man, I'm really busy. How am I going to take a break? Which basically means you've not got it right. If you can't take a break, you're leading to a breakdown. Prioritize that break so you can achieve a breakthrough.
Yeah.
I know breaks are not easy. Even me, my life is 150 to 200, sometimes 250 flights a year.
Exactly.
That's how much I travel. How do you take a break? I've learned the art of unwinding on the go.
How do you do that?
You have to do it on the go. Prioritize it. Listen to your favorite music. Read your favorite book. Eat your favorite food. Meditate while you're on the go. Sit there. Unwind yourself. Learn the art of cutting off from the surroundings while you're sitting in the car driving back home. You're sitting on a 17 hours flight to New York. What are you going to do all those 17 hours? Learn the art of cutting off from the surroundings and going within. I do that. December 10th, 1914. There was a massive explosion in West Orange, New Jersey, United States of America. 10 buildings in a factory owned by the legendary inventor Thomas Edison were engulfed by flames. 6 to 8 fire departments rushed to the scene but could not curb the chemical-fueled inferno. After having tried all that he could, as Thomas Edison calmly stood there, watching the fire destroy his entire life's hard work, his 24-year-old son Charles came over and stood next to him. In a childlike voice, Edison said to his son, "Charlie, go and get your mother and her friends. They'll never be able to see a spectacular fire like this in their entire life." Astonished and shocked by his father's response, Charles asked Thomas Edison, "Our entire factory is being burnt down to ashes, Dad." Thomas Edison replied in complete composure, "Yes, our factory is being burnt down to ashes. But all the mistakes we have made so far in the factory have also been burnt down to ashes. We will start all over again tomorrow." That evening, Thomas Edison told a New York Times reporter, "Although I'm 67 years old and I'm completely exhausted from running around and trying to control the fire, tomorrow I'll start all over again, afresh." And so he did. The next day was a fresh beginning for Thomas Edison and his son Charles in trying to rebuild what had been destroyed by the fire. Often, this is what life does unto us. Our dreams are shattered, our hopes broken, efforts baffled. Great people They don't cry. They try to rebuild their dreams. Great people don't give up, live up to the challenges that life throws at them. Great people don't go through, they grow through the difficulties that come on their path. They start all over again with great hope, with great determination, with great grit. And that is why they reach the highest peaks of success that most people only aspire for. That is why I say, no challenges, no success. No challenges, no success. A teacher teaching math to a class of 6-year-olds asked a boy called Arnav in class, Arnav, if I give you 2 mangoes and 2 mangoes, how many will you have? Arnav said 5. The teacher said, Arnav, if I give you 1, 2, 2 mangoes and 1, 2, 2 mangoes, how many will you have? 5, replied Arnav. The teacher was upset. But remember that Arnav's mom had said that Arnav doesn't like mangoes, he likes strawberries. So she changed her example. If I give you 2 strawberries and 2 strawberries, how many will you have? 4, replied Arnav. Oh, the teacher was pleased by the change of strategy. Just to confirm that Arnav had understood his math right, she asked Arnav again, Arnav, if I give you 2 mangoes and 2 mangoes, how many will you have? Arnav replied, 5. The teacher was now annoyed. How can 2 and 2 strawberries be 4 and 2 and 2 mangoes be 5? Arnav replied, I already have 1 mango in my bag, madam. Who was right? Was the teacher wrong? No, because 2 plus 2 is 4. Was Arnav wrong? No, because 2 plus 2 is 4 and 1 mango in my bag makes it 5. Isn't it a fact that all kinds of conflicts come because of the gap between technical rightness and practical rightness? The teacher was technically right. Technical rightness means to see the obvious. Technical rightness means to see what is visible. And Arnav was practically right. Practical rightness means to see beyond the obvious. Practical rightness means to see beyond what is visibly seen. Practical rightness means to see the hidden mango. Ladies and gentlemen, very often all our conflicts come because the gap between the technical and practical rightness. The next time you see someone not fit into your definition of what is technically right, please do not be judgmental. Go beyond the obvious, go beyond the seen, and try to look for the hidden mango, which will truly help you understand the person and resolve the conflicting situation that you are in. When you're wanting to do something out of the box, there's always going to be opposition from a society where parents want you to subscribe to a certain things, a settled job, a settled life in terms of family, and you're thinking completely out of the box. As soon as you want to do something out of the box, you're going to have to face challenges from the family side. After a while, however, when my family saw where I was reaching, how I was impacting people's lives, how I was really able to make a difference in the world, they accepted it very well. And I feel in terms of coping up with the challenges of how my friends have moved on in the industry, I think it's a question of self-discovery. I hate being a part of a mold that the world created for me. I don't want to subscribe to the mold that the world creates for you. I don't want to live a life in a paradigm that the world has created for me. I want to discover my own mold. I want to have a paradigm that I have invented. Only when you discover yourself, only when you live a life for what you are created, is when you feel happy, satisfied. Not just happy and satisfied, you're super effective. Even in the corporate world today, loads of people are just living a life which they're not created for because it pays the bucks. And why do they need the bucks? To pay the taxes, to pay the bills, to pay the mortgages. But they're not living a life of what they are created for. So it's basically kind of, fitting in just because it pays you. But I decided I don't want to fit in. So when I saw others moving on, my friends, my colleagues moving on high up, I really did not feel insecure at all because I didn't want to fit in to be someone else. I wanted to find myself, discover myself. Because as soon as you are successful in your self-discovery, man, you're effective and completely satisfied. A little boy once came running to his mother and asked her, "What are you doing, Mom?" She replied, "I'm making a beautiful embroidered design on this nice cloth." The little boy looked up to the cloth securely held in the wooden ring, the hoop, and complained, "A design? All I can see is just some colored threads, yellow, blue, red, black, pink, all tangled up, all messed up into each other, all complication, and you call it a design?" The mother picked up the little boy, put him on her lap, and said to him, "Now look at it, my son." And the boy saw a beautiful design, an incredible pattern, a systematic plan and a layout evolving on this cloth. The mother said to the boy, "When you look at the cloth from your side, all you see is a mess. When you look at the cloth from my side, all you see is a beautiful design, a pattern, a plan." Ladies and gentlemen, when we go through the helpless, overwhelming challenges in our life for no fault of ours or no fault of anybody else, and we cannot do anything to sort it out, if we see and look at it from our point of view, all we see is a mess. All we see is situations and events tangled up and jumbled up to create that mess. But when we look at the same situation from life's point of view, from God's point of view, we see a beautiful design, a pattern, a plan evolving in our life. In fact, for a beautiful design of embroidery to happen on one side, you cannot avoid the mess on the other side. And it's not just the nature of embroidery, such is the nature of life as well. This outlook actually gives us a very deep sense of inner strength and fortitude to face such helpless, overwhelming challenges in our life. Thus I say, change your vision, and your vision will change you. Where we are put in many complicated situations, I want to offer all of you a very powerful tool, a very simple one. When you're talking about making a choice, weigh the consequences and just decide which of the two consequences you are okay to bear. Moral dilemmas are easy to solve because moral dilemmas are between good and bad. Ethical dilemmas are hard to solve because ethical dilemmas are between bad and bad or good and good. Remember this always. You will have to make one choice. You're not going to be spared by life. You will always have to make one choice. Choices means two things to remember: informed choices and transformed choices. We should make informed choices. What is an informed choice? Is based on proper knowledge, based on proper deliberation, based on proper consideration, based on proper analysis, not haphazardly, whimsically made choices. And what is transformed choices? Choices based on our spiritual strength. So when we have
a combination of informed and transformed, then we make a choice. Because informed, we know what to do, but we can't do it. And thus we definitely need to make transformed choices. And therefore they say, an intelligent person will open your mind. A handsome person will open your eyes. आँख खुल जाता ना, अरे कितना handsome है. But a gentleman will open your heart. You know? A gentleman will open your heart. And what to speak of an intelligent, handsome gentleman. This is what I appeal to all of you.
What did you do to be who you are right now?
Yeah, I think if you are on an airline and on a flight, the cabin crew will come and announce that if there be a lack of oxygen supply in the cabin, masks will come from the panel above your head, secure them normally and breathe normally, and make sure your mask is in place before you assist and help others.
Exactly.
So you truly cannot help others unless you are yourself in place. And when we talk about putting your life in place, like my personal life in place, I feel there is a great need to give that priority to fix your life. So yes, there were challenges, moving from being a HP engineer to a lifestyle engineer, moving from being a pampered son to a monk, moving from living in comfort to living in meager facilities in the ashram, in the monastery. There were challenges, but these were all external challenges. The internal challenges were, am I missing out? You're out there, if I out there, you would probably be really elevated to a very high position in the industry. So initially when I just came in, the challenge was, am I missing out? And that challenge was taken care of by seeing the kind of lives that were being impacted by what I was doing. The satisfaction I felt in trying to bring a difference and making that impact was able to kind of deal with that challenge of feeling, did I miss out on something? I don't think I missed out on anything at any point, because seeing people's life changed is what brought me that great joy. Now when we see all of these pencils lying here on the table, can any of this pencil make a pencil sketch by itself? Can any one of these write a poem by themselves? Can any of these pencils actually draw a plan, a construction plan for a building? No. The pencil maker told the pencil that you can actually truly serve your purpose when you're in the hands of an expert. In the hands of an expert artist, a beautiful sketch is made. Pablo Picasso, the great artist, was one time walking on the streets, and a lady came up to him and said, Hey Picasso, you're such a great artist, can you make a pencil sketch of mine, please? Picasso made that sketch in a jiffy, in less than 30 seconds, and handed it over to the lady and said, $1 million, madam. She said, you made it in less than 30 seconds, what do you need the $1 million for? Picasso said, the $1 million is not for making it in less than 30 seconds. The $1 million is for the 30 years of hard work which makes me do it in less than 30 seconds. In the hands of an expert architect, the pencil can make a plan. In the hands of an expert poet, writer, the pencil can write a poem or a story. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, when we act as instruments, like this pencil, in the hands of God, in the hands of our teachers, our gurus, our mentors, our experienced, trustworthy guides, truly, we will be able to make an incredible impact on the world, regardless of who we are and what color we are of. एक बार एक माँ अपने बेटे को सवेरे सवेरे स्कूल जाने के लिए जगा रही थी, और बेटे ने स्कूल जाने से साफ इनकार कर दिया। आप तो जानते हैं कि जब भी हमारे माता पिता हमको स्कूल जाने के लिए जगाया करते थे, तो हम किसी न किसी प्रकार का बहाना दे दिया करते थे। कभी पेट में दर्द होता था तो कभी पीठ में दर्द, कभी सर में दर्द तो कभी बुखार आ जाता था। तब जब इस बेटे को जगाया गया, तब माँ ने बेटे से कहा कि तुम मुझे 2 कारण दो, तुम स्कूल क्यों नहीं जाना चाहते? बेटे ने कहा, पहला कारण, क्योंकि सारी टीचर्स मुझसे नफरत करती है, और दूसरा कारण, सारे विद्यार्थी, सारे स्टूडेंट्स भी मुझसे नफरत करते हैं। माँ ने कहा स्कूल तो तुमको जरूर जाना पड़ेगा। तो बेटे ने माँ से कहा तुम मुझे 2 कारण दो कि मैं स्कूल क्यों जाऊं। माँ ने कहा पहला कारण क्योंकि तुम 52 साल के हो, और दूसरा कारण क्योंकि तुम स्कूल के हेडमास्टर हो। अब चाहे हमको स्कूल जाना अच्छा लगे या नहीं लगे, आप सबको याद होगा कि जब भी स्कूल का पहला दिन होता था तो हमें बड़ा उत्साह भर जाता था। नए जूते, नई यूनिफॉर्म, नई स्कूल बैग, नई किताबें और एक नई नोटबुक, एक नई कॉपी भी हमको मिल जाती थी। जीवन में भी हर वर्ष, हर साल हमको एक कॉपी, एक नोटबुक मिलती है। 365 पन्नों वाली नोटबुक हर साल हमको दी जाती है। पिछले साल 2017 में आप विचार कीजिए कि इन पेजेस पर, इन पन्नों पर आपने क्या लिखा। इस पन्नों पर कई चैप्टर्स रहे हैं। कुछ आपके रिलेशनशिप संबंधों के चैप्टर, कुछ आपके प्रोफेशनल लाइफ के चैप्टर्स, कुछ आपके निजी सेहत, हेल्थ के चैप्टर्स, और कुछ आपके आध्यात्मिक जीवन, स्पिरिचुअल लाइफ के चैप्टर्स। अलग अलग प्रकार के चैप्टर्स हमने पिछले साल के 2017 की 365 वाली पन्नों की नोटबुक में लिखे हैं। कुछ चैप्टर्स बड़ी अच्छी हैंडराइटिंग में लिखे गए और कुछ चैप्टर्स जंजाल बना दिया हमने उसका। कुछ दिन हमारे संबंधों में कुछ कहने से, कुछ करने से जंजाल बन गया। हमारे प्रोफेशनल लाइफ में हमने कुछ चैप्टर जंजाल बनाकर रख दिए। खुशखबर तो ये है कि 2018 की जो ये नोटबुक हमको मिली है, इसका हर पन्ना, हर पृष्ठ, हर पेज खाली है। और अब ये हमारी चॉइस है कि हम इन पन्नों पर अपने जो संबंधों के चैप्टर, सेहत के चैप्टर, प्रोफेशनल लाइफ के चैप्टर, अपने आध्यात्मिक जीवन के चैप्टर, अपने मानसिक संतुलन के चैप्टर कैसी हैंडराइटिंग में लिखे। अच्छी हैंडराइटिंग में एक जंजाल बनाकर रख दे। और इसीलिए जैसे भी हम चॉइस करेंगे उसी प्रकार का हमारा जीवन का अनुभव होगा। I believe that the 7 greatest, I would say the 7 words which are the greatest enemy of growth and progress in any field, including what I'm doing, are we have always done it this way. Nokia thought we have always done it this way. They are out. You know, Blockbuster thought they've always done it this way. Netflix threw them out. If I as a monk thought that we have always done it this way, the monks in the past have always spoken this way, they've always been this way, well, I would be out as well. My not wanting to be out was not because I wanted to be the center. My not wanting to be out was so that I can reach out to people and help make a difference in their lives. So obviously I had to change with times. Obviously I had to change my jargon. Obviously I had to bring in a punch of a bit of humor in there. Obviously I would have to speak lines which will resonate with people. It's like, I hate using the word, but it's like saying old wine in a new bottle.
Right.
Principles never change. Values never change. Knowledge and wisdom doesn't change. But how you bring it to people, that certainly can change. And I believe that's what's resonated with people. It's not that I'm saying anything new. It's the same wisdom, the same knowledge. Many people are speaking it. But just the way you package it. So Nokia failed in packaging themselves rightly, coming into digital photography. Right. Blockbuster denied when Netflix approached them. They're out. And if I think I don't change, I don't keep up with the times, well, I'm outdated. If you're not updated, you're outdated. Whether it's spirituality or the industry out there, it doesn't matter. I think when we talk about being in the present, we don't have to start getting into the present when the pressure is high. We need to start practicing being in the present when the pressure is low. There's a very nice quote that I read once in one of the barracks of the Indian Army, which said, when you sweat a lot in times of peace, you bleed less in times of war.
Right.
IPL, for instance, cricket.
Yes.
Now, when the match is on, the world tournament's on, the competition stuff, you're right there under the spot, which means the pressure is high and you need to be focused, you need to be present. You can only do it effectively when you learn to be present in the smaller things of life. I often tell people that when we talk about being present, one thing that we should start practicing is start being physically present. Like I give the example, I have a glass of juice here, you know. When I'm sipping this mango juice, why do I need to watch television? Why do I have to keep checking messages on my phone? What I'm doing by looking at the television, by looking at the phone, is being distracted from drinking the juice. So if I'm drinking the juice, let me just drink the juice. What's happening is I'm being present, physically present. Now it's not so much about just drinking the juice, but about cultivating the attitude behind drinking the juice, of being present in what I'm doing. I also tell people, beyond being physically present, we need to also be emotionally present. Very often you see people today are talking to each other, chatting with each other, they're looking around here and there, they're scrolling on their phones, they're looking at their messages, they're sending WhatsApp messages. What they're doing is they're completely getting distracted and not learning to live in the now. Being emotionally present means when I'm talking to you, for instance, I am with you. I'm not looking at this plant behind me. I'm not looking at the camera here. I'm not looking at the cup of juice. I'm looking at you. I'm soaking in every single word as you speak. Now, it's not just about speaking. It's about cultivating the attitude of being present. Whether you drive a Volkswagen or you drive a Bentley, the road remains the same, doesn't it? Whether you speak on a Samsung or you speak on an iPhone X, whoever you're calling remains the same, isn't it? Whether you're flying economy or you're flying business, the destination where you're heading remains the same, isn't it? Whether you're wearing a simple fast track or you wear an Omega or a Rolex, the time remains the same, isn't it? It's quite amazing how we work ourselves up so much with increasing the standard of living that we forget to increase the standard of our life. And which is why wherever I travel, I make an appeal to people. There's nothing wrong with an Omega. There's nothing wrong with a Bentley. God bless you with that, and if you have it, drive it, no problem. But in trying to enhance and increase and improvise the standard of your living, please, do not compromise with the standard of your life. It's not the standard of your living that makes you happy. It's the standard of your life that makes you happy. And very often, we forget to give attention to those things that can truly make us happy. Which is why I always say, things that I'm talking about, they have utility value, right? Not happiness value. Travel business class or first class. Travel, no problem. Drive a Bentley, no problem. But in doing so, never, ever compromise on those principles that also improve the standard of your life. And therefore, I always say, some people are so poor, so absolutely poor that all they have is money. That's all they have. That's all they have. I consider that life a poverty-stricken life. If all you have is money, you're the poorest person in the world. Because there's more to life than money. And there's way more to life than what money can buy. And therefore I many times say, if you want to truly know how rich you are, drop a tear and see how many hands come forth to wipe that tear. Ladies and gentlemen, our happiness and our increased standard of life is not in things, it's in people. It's relationships. It's meaningful, heartfelt, deep bondings of love that bring fulfillment to the heart. It's those meaningful exchanges of love that we share with each other in relationships that brings true joy to the heart. And isn't it the greatest irony? It's something that brings in the greatest fulfillment we very conveniently neglect in just running after increasing and enhancing our standard of living. The pencil maker told the pencil that, what is truly important is what lies within you. So yes, externally we have our work, externally we have our personality, but internally, as a person, we have to also develop. So pencil is about finding the balance between the external and the internal. The external is the casing, the internal is the lead that makes an impact. So while we lead a life of valuables externally, we must also prioritize the values internally. While we lead a life of personality externally, we also need to prioritize being a good person internally. While we live a life of charisma externally, we also need to live a life of character internally. So the balance between the external and the internal is the balance of the lead in the pencil and the casing of the pencil. I think there's this one aspect that we all need to accept and come to terms with in life. There's going to be things that are beyond our control. Let's not fight this back. And let's not come into the mode of controllership thinking that everything's in my hands. That thinking that everything's in my hands can disappoint us, frustrate us when things don't go our way. So I think that's one aspect that I talk about, is come to terms with it, that there's going to be things that don't go my way. Yeah. And everything doesn't go by my watch. Life has its watch. Higher powers have their watch, and things will come to us. Also, there's this bulbs right up here. Yeah. They're lighting up the whole studio where we're shooting. It's quite amazing, these bulbs giving their light. But there's many bulbs in the storeroom who are waiting there to come in the studio and give their light so that the shooting can happen. When will that bulb in the studio ever get a chance to come up here? Now the beauty of life is that the bulb up here doesn't last forever. No bulb has lasted forever, and no bulb will last forever. No speaker has lasted forever. No speaker will last forever. No actor has lasted forever in terms of their fame. No actor will last forever. No athlete, no sports person has lasted forever, and no sports person will last forever. Just like this bulb. Everyone has their time. Everyone has their day. And that day doesn't last forever. So which basically means the bulb here won't be there one day. And the bulb in the storeroom is going to get its chance to come to the lampshade one day to light up the studio. You know what? The question in the mind of that little bulb there is, I agree, sir, all this philosophy understood. Sounds good, all this gyan.
Yes.
Sounds great. All this gyan sounds great. Yeah. But how do I continue until then?
That is the question.
So I think the parameter, the principle, the value, the ethic that actually helps us continue with perseverance and patience is hope.
Yes.
Hope is that one element that can keep us going. The worst thing to happen in life is to lose hope and be hopeless.
Correct.
So if we're sitting there waiting for our turn to come, hope against hope. One day, I will also have my time and my place. When, how, we do not know, because these are factors that are completely beyond our control. How does luck or destiny, what role does it play in victory or success? Right? Is it all hard work? Is it all destiny? What is it? Now, in my humble opinion, destiny is the situations that come to you, which are beyond your control. For example, you didn't choose your parents. Did any of you choose your parents? You were destined. That was destiny. You were born. ऐसा नहीं बोले ये मेरी बाप, ये मेरे माँ, मैं अवतार लूंगा इनसे. Have you ever thought like that? Never. Did you ever choose your looks? ऐसा नाक होगा, ऐसा कुछ. Did you choose? No one looks as good as their Facebook profile picture, and no one looks as ugly as their Aadhaar card picture. No one. No one looks like that. Correct? So situations are destiny. You didn't choose them. They came to you. If someone comes and insults me, I didn't choose it. It came to me. That situation is destined. But my response to those situations is my choice. Response is not destiny. What I choose is my choice. And when I choose it, that decides my future destiny. This is why they say man is the maker of his destiny, not situations. Situations will remain what they are, but how you respond to those situations is completely and entirely your choice. You have that situation which is destined. Now you have a choice to work hard, to cultivate that attitude. That attitude is not destiny. That attitude is a choice. And when you choose that attitude, hopefully victory will come to you right away. Even if it doesn't come to you right away, you have sown the seed that will pay back. The seed that is sown will certainly fructify. Now, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, or later. This is why persistence, sticking it out. The word mindfulness is a big thing in the world today. I was in San Francisco and I was invited to speak at Salesforce.
Okay.
And Mark Benioff, one of the things he's done at Salesforce is he has prioritized mindfulness for every single employee. Every single floor of their headquarters in Salesforce has a mindfulness zone. People can go there, practice mindfulness. In fact, every year they have this conference called Dreamforce in the month of November. Or 200,000 American top-notch professionals come for the conference. And in that 4 to 5 days conference, the last day is a mindfulness day, where they invite people who can speak to these professionals so that they can learn the art of internally connecting, stabilizing their minds. Because even Mark Benioff realized that when people are together, the output is much greater than when they're just distracted and lost. So the paycheck is never an issue. But if you cut corners, the organization never grows. So I think, yes, even in terms of profitability and organizational growth, spirituality does make a difference because it gives a person good character, integrity, certain values, where a person contributes the most. When I talk about self-confidence, I talk about trying to be the best version of yourself. We are constantly updating our apps. We're constantly updating our operating systems, whether it's an iOS or an Android.
Yeah.
And the updation of the apps or the operating systems means to bring the best versions of what exist.
Yes.
And whenever you're updating to a higher version of yourself, you have to be able to give the best of yourself to it. Okay. If you stick to the older version, you reach the plateau and you don't have to work harder. But when you update yourself to a higher version, you have to give the best of yourself and 200% of your energy there.
Yeah.
Hard work, coming out of the comfort zone. Which is why many times I say, you are your own competition actually.
That's true.
Nobody is your competition.
That's true.
We have to compete with ourselves every single moment, every single day to get better than ourselves, to get the better versions of ourselves, to get the best version of ourselves. So when I talk about self-confidence, I talk about being the best version of yourself and having that full confidence that I can crack it. I can get there. It's amazing how money can be known by so many different ways. In a temple, church, or charity, it's called a donation. In a school, it's called a fee. In a marriage, dowry. And in a divorce, alimony. When you owe money to someone, it's called a debt. When you pay it to the government, it's called a tax. In a court, it's a fine. When you receive it regularly after retirement, it's called a pension. When an employer gives it to a worker, it's called a salary. When a master gives it to a servant, it's called a wage. When children receive it, it's an allowance.
And when you borrow it from a bank, it's called a loan. When you offer it after a good service, it's called a tip. When paid to a kidnapper, it's called a ransom. When illegally received in the name of a service, it's called a bribe. And when used to share and to serve others, it's called happiness. There's nothing wrong in possessing money. The problem is when money possesses you. Earn more money, fulfill your needs, utilize your money to share and serve others, and transform the value of your money from currency to happiness. I'm a simple small person. In Sanskrit there is a verse which says Mukam karoti vachalam. Even a dumb man can speak. Panghum langhayate girim. Even a lame man can cross a mountain. Yat kripa tamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. It's by the grace of Shri Guru and God that one can do what we are doing. And therefore, if you ask me what is my motivation to keep going, I don't even think I'm inspiring millions or crores, as you said. People are watching and people are hearing. It's not my knowledge. It's the knowledge coming from God. It's the knowledge coming from my Guru and so many other monks in the monastery from whom I learn. I simply act as a microphone. A microphone simply amplifies the voice of the speaker. So if there's something that's motivating people, it's not me. It's the knowledge and the power of that grace that is behind me, which is unseen to your eyes. You can't see that, but that's the life that I live. When you don't see me on screens, I'm in a monastery in a small little room, every morning practicing my spiritual sadhana, every morning connecting to God through the chanting of the holy names. Every morning I sit and listen to the other monks. I'm not only speaking, I sit there, I hear others, I learn from them. And I'm tremendously inspired by the picture that I showed you, Srila Prabhupada, his life. I'm tremendously inspired by his example. And of course my Guru Radhanath Maharaj, who tirelessly keeps on going and serving. If there's anything that motivates me, it's my chanting, it's my hearing, and it's the company of my Guru and other like-minded monks. That's what keeps me going. We are all created to fly, to live by the incredible potential that we have all been invested with. But often we sit on our branches, clinging to the things that are familiar to us, remaining stuck in our comfort zones, not willing to venture out, not willing to take risks. The possibilities are endless, but for most of us, they remain undiscovered because we continue to conform to the familiar, to the comfortable, to the mundane. So for the most part, our lives are mediocre instead of exciting, thrilling, and fulfilling. What is the branch that's holding you back from flying high? What's the fear that's stopping you from taking a risk? What is the weakness that's inhibiting your growth? Unless we cut off the branches we are clinging to and free ourselves, we can never take off and reach newer heights in our life. What are you waiting for? Cut the branch and take your flight. A vegetable vendor used a whiteboard with the words "Fresh vegetables sold here" to attract people to buy his vegetables. A man came up to him and said, "Simply by seeing, we can tell that your vegetables are so fresh. Why do you need to advertise them as fresh? Rub off the word fresh." The vendor did so, leaving behind the words "vegetables sold here" on the board. Another man came up and said, "We know you're selling vegetables, not fruits. Why don't you wipe off the word vegetables?" The vendor complied. Left on the board now were two words, "sold here." After a while, an elderly lady approached him and said, "If you're sitting in the market, you're not giving your veggies for free, are you? Take off that sold." The vendor removed the sold, and the white board had only one word left, "here." A schoolboy passing by teased the vegetable seller, saying, "Everyone in the world knows you're sitting here, not there. Why the here?" The vegetable seller erased the last word, making the whiteboard clean and empty. Another person came up and said, "Only a stupid man would keep such a nice whiteboard empty. Why don't you write something on it to advertise your vegetables?" Everybody around us has an opinion to make. Everybody around us has a suggestion to offer, and most often with the best intentions. But if we end up listening to what everybody else has to say, we may forget to do what we are inspired to do, what we are meant to do. In the noise of others' suggestions and opinions, don't lose your voice. Take good advice, but also learn the art of navigating through that advice to follow your own journey. Anything that you evaluate by face value, saying this is bad, could actually turn out to be good.
Give me an example.
An example is how I came to the world on social media. There was a particular clip on WhatsApp that started circulating. Someone had played mischief, had taken a joke out of context, and had started circulating it. In fact, my inbox, WhatsApp, was filled with the same video, 3.8 megabytes, the day I got it 3 years back. And I was worried, God, what I'm saying could get me in trouble. And I thought, God, this is a difficult situation. In fact, I even called a lawyer to see what the repercussions could be, because what I had said could bring me in controversy. And it's quite amazing. It was that clip that actually brought me to the world. So what you see as a curse could turn into a blessing. What you see as bad could turn into good. So never, ever evaluate any situation based on its face value. Something you think is good could be absolutely destructive for you, and something which you think is absolutely bad and destructive could turn out to be something constructive. Didn't Steve Jobs say, therefore, connect the dots backwards? A farmer had 3 donkeys and was taking them for sale to the market. On the way, he saw a river and desired to take a dip. There was an issue though. He only had 2 ropes, and thus would be able to tie only 2 of his 3 donkeys to a tree. How to tie the third one, he wondered. Around there he saw a wise man and approached him for a rope to tie his third donkey. The man did not have a rope, but had a brilliant suggestion. He told the farmer, "Tie the 2 donkeys up to a tree with the ropes you have, and make sure that the third donkey is watching. Then simply pretend to tie the third one." The farmer followed the man's advice and went for a dip in the river. When he came back, he saw that the donkeys stood exactly at the same spot where he had left them. He thanked the wise man, untied the donkeys, and patted the third one so it starts moving as well. After going a little distance, he turned around and was surprised to see the third donkey still standing at the very same spot. He tried cajoling and talking to the donkey. It did not help. He tried to push the donkey from behind, but it refused to move from the spot. Helpless, the farmer came back to the man, who asked him, "Did you untie the third donkey?" "Untie? But I never tied him up," replied the farmer. The man said, "You know that. The donkey doesn't. It still thinks it is tied up." The farmer then went through the imaginary motions of untying the donkey. And guess what? Sure enough, the donkey moved immediately as though released and walked over to join its 2 friends. What's holding us back from moving ahead and reaching our dreams? Is it a lack of resources? Is it a lack of opportunities? Is it a lack of support? Or are we tied up by the imaginary ropes of doubt, fear, hesitation. Yes, we certainly need to work on the external parameters needed for our success. What is even more important is that we untie our mental blocks and expedite our journey towards our goal.
Healthcare is shifting from treatment to prevention. Going to the dentist regularly is important, not just when you are in pain. Brushing his teeth twice a day every day and visiting the dentist twice a year could have prevented the pain he's experiencing now. Why wait for problems to occur in our life if we can proactively address them and save ourselves so much pain? Going to the gym regularly is important, not just when you want a summer body. Small acts of love and kindness done regularly are important, not just the big gifts given on birthdays and anniversaries. It is the small things done rightly and consistently that make a huge difference in our lives. Success is less about intensity and more about consistency. A tourist who was walking around a city came upon a construction site. He saw 3 men busy with their task of laying bricks. Wanting to check the inspiration, the motivation with which they were engaged in the exact same job, he asked the first man what he was doing. And the man said he was laying bricks. When he asked the second man the exact same question, the man said he was building a wall. When he turned to the third man and asked what he was doing, he said he was building a cathedral. 3 men doing the exact same task, but their outlook to their work so different. The first man, an ordinary outlook, get your job done. The second man, a normal outlook, make something big that can make you big money. And the third man, an extraordinary outlook, seeing the bigger picture, not the brick, not the wall, but the cathedral, and doing his bit, playing his small part in making something spectacular. Such inspired individuals are happy to be a part of a larger purpose, happy to work together as a team, giving their 200% to what they do. Not only do they feel fully satisfied with their work, not only do they grow professionally, but they become heroes, often unsung heroes, in creating something incredibly amazing. During one of his visits to NASA, J.F. Kennedy asked a janitor mopping up the floor what his job at NASA was. And the gentleman instantly replied, "I'm helping send a man to the moon." So, are you laying a brick, building a wall, or creating a towering cathedral? Change your outlook and you will be outstanding. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon. 2 school-going friends in a small town had a crazy idea. They rounded up 3 goats from a farm close by and painted the numbers 1, 2, and 4 on their sides. That night, they let the goats loose inside their school building. The next morning, when the teachers, staff, children entered the school, they could literally smell something was wrong. They saw goat droppings all over the place and concluded that goats had entered the building. Now it was a mission to locate the goat. A team was assigned to look for the goats, and very soon the 3 goats with the numbers 1, 2, and 4 painted on them
were found. The school authorities were relieved, but simultaneously worried. We found 1, 2, and 4. Where was the goat number 3? The search team spent the rest of the day looking for the goat number 3. There was panic, frustration. The school declared a holiday for the students only unto their joy. The teachers, helpers, canteen boys, everybody was busy looking for goat number 3, which of course was never found. You know why? Because it simply did not exist. Aren't we all like the search team in the school? We have our goats right in front of us. We all have a unique ability that no one in the world can replicate. But instead of making the most of what we have, instead of focusing on our gifts, our strengths, our potential, we often continue to look for the elusive, missing, non-existent goat number 3. We keep worrying about and chasing the missing piece, what we lack, what we have tried hard for and never found, what doesn't exist in us. And I'm not even saying we shouldn't try. We have to try our best before knowing something is not meant for us. But after trying hard for long and still not being able to reach even the basic success in doing something, I guess it's time to ask ourselves this question. Wouldn't it be better to focus on goats 1, 2, and 4 that I have and do something with them rather than chasing goat number 3, which simply doesn't exist in me? A man got lost in a desert and had exhausted all the water he had carried a couple of days ago. He knew for sure that if he didn't get some water, he would certainly die. Although completely exhausted, the man didn't give up hope. He kept walking, looking for some sign of good fortune. Suddenly, he saw a small hut at some distance. Could it be a mirage, he thought, or maybe just a hallucination? But having no other option left, he edged closer only to realize that the hut was real. Gathering the last bits of energy left, he dragged his tired body inside the hut, hoping he could find some water. The hut was empty and seemed like it had been abandoned for quite some time. His heart skipped a beat when he saw what was in the hut. A hand pump. Water finally. He was overjoyed. He began working the hand pump, but no water came out. He tried harder and yet harder. No water. Finally, after putting in every bit of energy, he gave up out of exhaustion and frustration and sat down thinking, maybe I'm destined to die out of thirst today. And then a second ray of hope. He noticed a bottle in one corner of the hut. It was filled with water and corked up to prevent evaporation. He uncorked the bottle, and as he was just about to devour the life-giving water, he noticed a piece of paper attached to it. The handwritten message read, "Use this water to start the pump. Don't forget to fill the bottle when you're done." He was now in a dilemma: to follow the instruction and pour the water into the pump, or ignore it and just drink the water. What if he put the water into the pump and it didn't work? But then maybe the instruction was correct. Should he risk it? If it turned out to be false, he would be throwing away the last water he would ever see. Have you ever been in a situation like this, where there are only two options and uncertainty about which one will work? What will you do? Which one will you choose? Well, you have to choose one and be willing to bear the consequences that it brings. Many people don't decide because they're fearful of the consequences and they continue to remain confused in their life. The man decided to take a leap of faith. Hands trembling, he poured the water into the pump, closed his eyes, said a prayer, and started working the pump. He heard a gurgling sound, and water came down, gushing out, way more than he could possibly use. He drank the cool, refreshing water to his heart's content and quenched his thirst. He was going to live. Feeling much better, he looked around the hut and found a pencil and a map of the region. The map showed that he was still far away from civilization, but at least now he knew where he was and in which direction to go next. He filled up his flask for the journey ahead, and as per the instruction on the note, also filled up the bottle and put the cork back in. And before leaving the hut, he added his own lines below the instruction. Believe me, it works. Most of us may not be confronted with a situation like this, where the choice made decides whether we live or die. Yet, we have our own journeys to take and our own choices to make. If the choice we make goes our way, fantastic. We can inspire people by telling them, believe me, it works. And if it doesn't go our way, we can share our mistakes, our experiences, our realizations, and empower people to make their right choices. There was a king who had a great fascination and love for paintings. One time he decided to offer a very valuable prize to the artist who would paint a beautiful picture depicting peace. On the final day of the judgment, many artists brought their paintings with the hope of winning that valuable prize. The king looked at all the paintings and selected two in particular, and now he had to choose one out of the two paintings for the valuable prize. The first painting, a beautiful, calm lake with clear, transparent waters. The lake was a perfect mirror to the towering mountains surrounding it. Above it was the blue sky with white, fluffy clouds like cotton balls floating in space. Anybody who saw this painting thought it was the perfect masterpiece representing peace. The second painting had mountains too, rugged, dry, bare. Above these mountains, an angry sky, overcast with dark clouds, lightning streaks here and there, a massive downpour of rains, a rumbling, ferocious waterfall cascading down on one side of this bare mountain. Peace, thought the people who saw this painting. As the king looked closer, he saw behind this rumbling waterfall a branch of a bush growing out of a crack in a rock. On the branch was a mother bird who had made a nest, and within the nest was very peacefully, with great affection, feeding its little ones. Which one do you think did the king choose for his valuable prize? The second one. The king explained, peace does not mean to be in a place where there's no noise, where there's no trouble, where there's no hard work, where there's no trials, where there's no tribulations, where there's no difficulties. Peace means to be in the middle of all mayhem and chaos, and yet to stay calm, yet to stay focused, yet to make that inward journey. And isn't that the story of real life as well? Spirituality is the art of bringing us to that inner calm, to that inner peace in our real life with all kinds of difficulties, troubles and problems surrounding us. That is the meaning and definition of real peace.
If you want another amazing video highlighting excellence in the Indian community, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.